Hello and welcome to our first episode of Minerva PLM TV. I'm Jennifer Moore, your host, and today I have with me a very special guest, Diana Smith, one of Minerva's consultants. Diana, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome.
Thanks, Jennifer.
So Diana, tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up at Minerva and in PLM of all things.
I've been working in product development my entire career. So I started out as a tool designer using CAD, working with engineering, manufacturing, and suppliers. So that was a good start. From there, I went to be a design lead, doing design checks and change control boards, and understanding the change impacts that our designs have on the products in the business. Then I went into technical implementations. Since I was the lead, I would sit in on the MES implementation, the MRP implementation, and then PDM and PLM, which I kind of found my niche because that was more around CAD and stuff. Because of my background at that point, I became a trainer.
Oh, wow.
And training became communication and planning and OCM. So at Minerva, my background and understanding really bring the value to our clients.
That's really amazing. What kind of products did you design?
Oh, everything from aerospace, DOE, Department of Energy, cell phones, medical devices. I really had the gamut because as a tool designer, I would often come in and design the product and then leave. So I did a lot of small engagements. I saw a lot of ways that a lot of different companies do their product development.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also understood the manufacturing side of it as well. So I think my background really added a lot of depth from the end-to-end process of product development.
Absolutely. And you were mechatronic before mechatronic was cool. So that's really amazing, Diana. You've obviously naturally worked your way around to PLM, with starting out as a designer and whatnot. But tell me a little bit more about what it means to lead communications and training teams in a technology project.
Well, OCM is usually brought in with new technology and new processes. Mm-hmm. So we really want to manage the change to the business. So communication and communicating how those changes are going to impact the business to the end users is really key.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And when you say OCM, you're talking about really organizational change management. And what does that really mean, particularly when putting it into a PLM context?
So Minerva has a structured approach to OCM, mm-hmm. and it comes down to about 5 main categories. We usually start out with a stakeholder management strategy, understanding who's going to be impacted. And then we go into project governance and strategy. What's going to be the scope of the project? How are we going to implement it? And what is the strategy on decision making? Then we go into communication. Now that we've understood our audience, we need to communicate during the entire project. And then we have learning and acceptance. So we need to learn how to use that new technology and accept that that's our new way of doing our job. And then there's sustain and maintenance. So that comes after go live. What are we going to do about that? Are we going, we could talk about that a little bit more later.
Okay. So that's a great, high level overview of the different components of organizational change management. How do you know that you need it, or why do we need OCM? Are there results that a company can expect by including OCM principles in their PLM projects?
Well, whether you know it or not, I'm sure you could probably Google it, but the number one reason that technology implementations fail is the lack of OCM.
Wow.
If you don't have OCM, if you're not communicating to your end users that this change is coming to prepare them, mm-hmm. they're not going to feel involved. A lot of times you're going to drive this change by implementing this new technology to maybe increase revenue. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's going to be a faster turnaround or response time. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to get your engineers out of chasing data and back into innovating.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never met an engineer yet in almost 20 years that has said to me, my favorite part of my job is the data management. not the creation.
Right. Right.
So obviously that makes a lot of sense, Diane, and it's something that I hear often whenever companies have failed with PLM in the past. There was a lot of
Right.
focus maybe on out-of-the-box features, but not necessarily a true understanding of the change impact or how to measure acceptance and make sure that people are on board.
Exactly. So OCM really brings structure and communication to the technology
Okay.
to get people involved in understanding the impact and when it's going to happen, and it allows the business to be better prepared.
Mm-hmm. So when you first are, looking at the original element of stakeholder management, how do you break that down into manageable pieces so that it doesn't become, a huge project in and of itself just to do each piece of the organizational change management?
Exactly. So we really want to understand who's involved. We really need to understand, is it going to be just our employees?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people forget management's really involved, or maybe management forgets the smaller users. So we really need to investigate across the company and maybe suppliers. Do you want them to be coming into your system?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand who's impacted. And everyone's impacted differently. So we need to break those people down into groups, because management's going to want a different type of communication. End users are going to need a different type of training. We need to identify who's going to be on this team, who's going to help implementation, who's going to do the testing, who's going to be developing. So stakeholder management is more than just who's going to be affected. It's going to be who's developing the training, who's delivering the training, who's going to be making the decisions about your department. Because remember, we're not just talking about engineering often. We're talking about quality, purchasing,
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing. So we really need to look across who's going to be our representative of those different disciplines and participate in different ways. Now, all those people have other jobs. So how much time can they spend on this new project?
And
so that's stakeholder management. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
So it's actually a pretty natural process, really just doling out some of the responsibilities. And there's, multiple pieces to take into consideration. But after that core team is together, it makes sense to start that next phase, the project governance and strategy. What activities fall into this bracket?
So governance and strategy, that's understanding the project scope. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes that might be in the statement of work already, but it's not a bad idea to get project governance involved right up front. So we're understanding the project scope. We're understanding timing. How much time are we going to spend implementing this? When's a good time to go live? Now, these things can be fluid and change, but we do need to understand what that is. Mm-hmm. And who decides what? You're going to have your core team on the ground making your day-to-day decisions. But what happens when there's an issue that raises? Do you want to let engineering make all the decisions, or is there an escalation process? Mm-hmm. So we need to understand what gets escalated, because you don't want to go up to management every time there's something small, mm-hmm. but you want to understand at what level what goes where. So if we're going to extend the time, that needs to be escalated. If we're going to spend more money, that probably needs to be escalated. Mm-hmm. And then we also have, how's the project going to be run? Is it going to be agile or safe or waterfall or a hybrid approach? Mm-hmm. And then finally, how are we going to deal with consultants?
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, there's generally people within those core teams that are really good mediators and help to overcome a lot of the challenges or discussions or changes that come up and make decisions to a certain level. But that's a great point, that knowing what type of change or request needs to be elevated and what that elevation or escalation path really is super important. So, and
it's good to have that understood in the beginning of the project.
Right. Instead of waiting until something happens.
Right. Exactly.
Right. That's excellent. So, you have your team identified, you've decided how you're going to make decisions and what type of project you're going to run. How do you start to communicate all of this out and build awareness within the company at large? And at what time should you do that as well as communicating with your core team?
Exactly. This is probably one of the most important parts of it. So I usually start out from when I'm in an engagement is understanding what resources we have. What kind of communication does the company already use? Is it everything an email blast? Do people read those emails? Is it a poster in the lunchroom? Do you have somebody that is in charge of this communication? Because
Mhm.
me as a consultant that wants to come in and help you, I can help you develop different assets to deliver to your users. But if they receive an email from me, Diana from Minerva, they're probably not going to have a lot of weight. So we also need somebody, is it going to come from HR? Is it going to be coming from a VP?
Mhm.
Or is there an OCM team at your company? So there's a lot of different things that come into it. One message to different users is rarely one thing fits all. So we have an entire communication plan. What kind of communication happens months before
Mhm.
to give people a heads up? How are we going to let them know that it's right around the corner?
Mhm.
And what are we going to do with those naysayers when people start giving feedback like, I don't like this, I don't want this? How are those things going to be met? So
Mhm.
there's quite a lot of things about planning and scheduling and delivering these different assets. And then how are we going to act on that feedback, get the feedback? Um,
Making sure that
yeah,
the communication is really a two-way street and it's not just a
it's
continuous
not just
feed.
email blasts.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
super important.
And there's some really cool things you can do with communication. You can get a logo so that when somebody sees this article about this project in an email, they're like, oh,
Mhm.
that's me. I need to watch it. Or maybe you have a tagline that's a XPLM is coming or EPLM, whatever you're going to name your project. So
Mhm.
people start identifying that this matters to me and I need to read this or look at
Mhm.
this poster or attend this luncheon or go to a workshop, however you want to be communicating. In fact, most of the time you're going to be using quite a few different communication techniques because everybody hears a little different. Some people want to see it. Some people
Mhm.
just want to read about it. And some people want to participate, especially those naysayers. You want to get them in on your team because you want to convert them up ahead because they're going to be your best, what do you want to call them, evangelists
Yes.
when that project goes out.
Absolutely. And it's super important for everyone to understand that these changes are coming oftentimes as a result of feedback that they've already been giving about, challenges in their job or in their communication processes internally with design data or even, with the downstream and suppliers and whatnot. So, yeah, getting them on board and helping everybody embrace the change is absolutely important. And earlier you mentioned that participant identification, that's really key. Your excited, trained super users can have a huge impact on learning and acceptance across your enterprise. So how do you enable companies to increase their learning and acceptance? And what are some considerations?
So a lot of people just, and I think this is kind of a mistake. You have your little core team and they do all the development and they're making all the decisions. Hopefully you have good communication to get those people out of that bubble and out to the rest of the broader user group.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good idea to bring in a fresh team maybe for user acceptance testing
Okay.
or functional testing. And then maybe you want to find out, maybe these people don't want to stand in front of other people. Do you want to have a train the trainer program?
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good idea, especially if you have a larger company. It's not very financially feasible quite often to be bringing in a lot of external trainers.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to fly in, they've got to stay at a hotel, you've got to find some place to hold lots of people. It's really quite popular to do a train the trainer program because you've got a lot of employees that have already had their hands on and they're going to be able to talk about how things are today
Mm-hmm.
and how things are going to change for those users. It's hard to bring somebody in from the outside and explain both sides, the from to condition of your systems. So I really suggest that you get a new, fresh team. Get some of those people that have given feedback through those emails or through surveys. Collect some of the um, information, but a little bit more on the broader point of learning and adoption. That's more on the adoption side of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that goes into the training portion. So who's going to do the training? Who's going to develop the training material? What kind of training are we going to have? What
Mm-hmm.
works best for our company? There's really quite a lot of things to decide. Are we going to do face-to-face training?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to do a big workshop and just throw it all at them all at once? Are we going to do small little video clippets and they can do it during a break or on their own time?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Is it going to be a virtual workshop? And then do you have the facilities to have these training sessions? Because when you're working with a computer system, do you want them to all bring laptops?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a server to set up? If you're going to be developing training material, when is that server going to show the latest version of the software and still give you time to develop the training before go live?
Right.
So you could do pre-recorded. You could do a lot of the overhead stuff
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time. And as those things get finalized, add more to it. So there's a lot of decisions to make for training and delivery.
And I'm sure there's other considerations that come into play too, like how large of a team are you actually training? What countries are they based in? Do you have remote workforces?
Yeah. And then there's another one, there's different cultures.
Yes.
There's things that you can't always do across different cultures. I know I've run into a couple times where certain countries don't allow you to test employees.
Mm-hmm.
It's not allowed on the job. So where in the US, it's kind of common to have maybe a knowledge-based question to reinforce the learning, but
Mm-hmm.
you need to really be aware of the different cultures that you're delivering it to. Do you want to translate into multiple languages,
Mm-hmm.
or do you have an English-based workforce?
All really, really good points to consider. So the last point that you mentioned earlier is this sustaining and maintenance concept. So by ensuring you've onboarded your stakeholders, you've documented your decisions, you've taken into action the communication portions, you're continuously ensuring that you're bringing your people, your processes, your systems, all of that together to improve one or more parts of your business. So the final step, again, is that sustaining and maintenance. New users are eventually going to be hired. They'll need to be trained. New processes need to be able to be implemented or improved on the same system, hopefully. So what are your tips and tricks for longevity, that first 6 months after go live, and then maybe 2 years or 5 years down the road?
Yeah, as you know, working with Eris, it's the power of Eris is that it's very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And that it can be changed. You don't have to do a whole new implementation or what have you. So storing that training data, how are we going to store it? Are we going to put it on the web? Are we going to have dedicated trainers to be able to do refresher courses for new onboarding?
Mm-hmm.
And then how are we going to update it? If you have it pre-recorded, it's a little tough to do small updates on the user interface.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe there's other choices that you can do that. So there's the strategy for understanding how we're going to deliver this to the end users. Then we have the maintenance of it afterwards. There's also another portion of it on letting management know if it was successful.
That's a really good point. And how do you measure success, right? Do you just, is it a feeling? Our users feel like they're doing a better job and it's easy, or, are there certain happiness measurements, or how do you do that?
Yeah, that's one of those things that you should be doing up in the front during project governance and strategy, mm-hmm. is identify some of those key things that the business wants to take away from this project. What do they want to gain? What are the pain points? Mm-hmm. Get some measurements, get some key KPIs going. Maybe how long does it take to implement a change process in engineering? How long does it take for the approval process? Mm-hmm. How long does it take to hit the purchasing department, what have you? Whatever you're trying to improve, get those measurements up front, because usually by the time you go live, those are the things that the company is responsible for getting those measurements. How did we improve? Mm-hmm. What's it look like now? Are we doing it with less workforce? Are we doing it faster? Are we meeting our customers' requests mm-hmm. better and faster? Are we beating our competition, right? So get some of those KPIs, and that's going to make your next project a lot more successful with management.
That's all excellent points. And one of the things that we hear a lot from our customers that they're measuring, especially for those in regulated industries, is that they're able to more quickly submit to the different governing bodies, whether it be the FDA or UTMED or those 510Ks, that all of the information that they need is exponentially faster, whether in an initial submission or to comply with an audit, right?
Exactly. Audits are important. You want to make sure you've got all the data you need.
Yes.
the right time at the right place, and that you have it accessible and that it's right.
Absolutely. Well, Diana, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. This has been great. And I know that we've just scratched the surface on OCM, and our listeners definitely took away some great ideas for adding OCM, either, all of it, the complete structure, or just some key parts that are manageable for their business size and needs. It would be really great to have you back again to maybe share some stories about where you've used OCM at some of our customers. Would you be...
Sure.
Oh, awesome. Great. I can't
Thanks,
wait.
Jennifer. We'll talk about some more things.
Beautiful. And thanks so much for everyone for joining us for our first session. If you like this video, remember to hit like and subscribe to be notified whenever we post new content in the future. Have a question or want to see a particular subject covered? Comment below or email me at jmo@minerva-plm.com. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you.